All right, so we have the SBA code that we did some time ago. It's mostly complete except for the ability to edit slash delete information. Um, okay, it's essentially what we have information on football players. So we have like a directory on football players. We store the information in a struct. We keep an information on their first name, their last name, their birth date. We have an ID for them that's automatically generated. Every new player gets essentially an auto incremented ID. And we could store up to 250 players. So we have the index variable. These are the functions that we have. As I said before, we have enough functions to basically satisfy the criteria of the SBA. But, I mean, in the truest of sense, I feel like if most of you all would prefer to have what you could consider a complete program in terms of meeting as much functional requirements as possible. And I actually feel like if CXC put in this functional requirements, um, its functional requirements, uh, requirement in your SBA, because a lot of students were writing programs that met the criteria for a high mark without having an actually functional program, which is very possible. You could write a program with five functions, reading file input output, using a struct, and the program does nothing at all, really. But the purpose of this is for you guys to be able to display that you actually have the capability to create something, or at least understand the basics of creating something, which is to be able to say, there's some functionality to it. All right. So we had our call to our menu in main, depending on what menu returned. We call the functions add player, view players, player search, or exit. Options 4 and 5 we never filled out because options 4 and 5, right? View payments and see all outstanding balances. Well, we never got to there, but I actually want to change option, not option 4, but to actually extend option 3, the player search, to when the player search is done, give the option to actually edit or delete a player as well. So let's just run um, the code and see what goes on. Let's view all players, right? So we have some student names in the class, and we want to search for a player now. Search. All right, we have the option to search by ID, which would carry us to a specific player, or we could search by name, which would give us a specific player too, right? And we put in we had put in the what you call this thing, the functionality in which that you could search for part of a player name, right? Let me see, just moving forward. Two fewer players. We had two people who had any same last names. No. Yes, no. No, we had Brandon Dalrymple and Dalrymple Tondo, right? So if it is that we search DALR, we would have gotten the two. But then we need to specify which one of these players would be the one that we want to edit or delete from the system. Okay, so let's just jump to the search and see how we could extend this functionality to delete or edit. So if it is that we search for a specific ID number, it should really just present this one person. If it is that we searching by name, then it will display all the persons whose names are there. What we need to do at this point is, let's say for instance we have give me two names that are similar to each other. Right, we had Clement and Porter, right? Emmanuel. That's how you spell it? What? Y'all messing with me. Porther. All right, let's say you're 101, 102, and we had 103, right? Who is Jeremy? Jeremy? What's your last name? Spell your last name? Lovel. All right. So we have these three people inside of here. What we want to do is, of course, we know that if we search for a particular ID and we find that ID, hey, it's great. We could just directly go to the ID, for edit or to edit that ID or to edit that ID or to delete that ID, mark that ID for deletion. Yeah? But if it is that we have, let's say we entered EMM, this was our search key. We have two names that this could potentially match. So it means that in the list of names that get matched, we should probably store the IDs of the list of names that got matched as long as it's more than one, and display that for the user to be able to say, hey, I want to select this specific person. Correct? That makes sense? So when we do the search based on EMM, really and truly we should have probably an array that would have stored 101 and 102. Okay? Right. All right. Sorry about. Once we display this information, which we're already doing, again, the goal is to be able to say, to put a sub-menu after we take this search information and say, well, do you want to edit, delete, or just cancel? Okay? Because maybe sometimes you just want to search to see if a name is inside of it. So what is the sequence of things that we have to do? What do you all think is the first thing that we need to do out of what I said just now? Once I perform the search, what's the next step? The next step is to well, what is brought up is correct, but what do you want to do with what is brought up? Right, that's the first thing. Give an option, give a menu that will say edit or delete. Right? So the first steps that we have to take is that in the case of the name search, because for the ID search, the ID is what the ID is. It's either the ID there or not there. If it's there, then we could say, hey, edit or delete this person. But if we do a search and we get more than one person, we have to ask which of these we want to work on, and then show the menu that say, okay, for this person you want to work on, do you want to edit their information or do you want to delete their information? All right, should I write that down or we could hold that in our heads? All right, so we have a to-do. To-do, right? Hold all results from name search and then display menu to edit / delete. So we're going back. We know that this is the steps here. We're coming back after to then show something else there. But we need to get this done. Right? We need to get this done. So first things first, we have the selection, sorry, the selection, we have the ID key that we would have searched for, right? We need to say, okay, if the name was found, then we save in this ID key as the option to either search, sorry, delete or edit, right? For this one, we have to show a menu after and say, well, please select from the results given which ID you want to use. All right. So in this case, let's create a integer called action_ID. Right? And let's create an integer also called an integer array called search results. And this is an array. And we could probably have up to 10 names stored into search results. Let's hope that we don't have more than 10 persons, right, with like 2 similar names or whatever, that it would break our search results array. If not, we could just increase the size of this to 20. All right, but 10 should be reasonable for now. Yeah, you could, and I guess if you have, yeah, like that's the maximum that it should be. You can't get more players than from a search than that's inside there, right? So that's like if you have like what like a Dutch team where everybody name have Van in it, like Van Nistelrooy, Van Persie, Van what, and somebody decide to search for Van, everybody name will come up, right? Van der Sar. I guess Dutch names not so much Van anymore. I guess that was just an era in football, right? All right. So for the first thing that we want to do, once we get this ID that we search for, we know that if we find the ID, we put inside a printf. We put inside a printf, right? Sorry, we'll print out the name corresponding with this ID. So what we could do is that we could use action ID. Sorry, we could create a flag that says, all right, if it is that select was 1 and the flag is changed from 0 to 1, we're going to put that value inside of action ID. Okay? So we have underscore, sorry, found underscore ID is equal to 0. And what we want to do is, as long as we find somebody, we say found underscore ID is equal to 1. We switch the flag, the found flag, to 1 so that we can save this person's ID number to edit or delete. Reasonable? Everybody understand where I'm at, right? Okay. So after this for loop, inside of this case 1, we could say if found underscore ID is equal to 1, then what do we want to do? Then we want to put this ID that was found, actually we could just do it inside of the, the loop here, right? We could say that, what was my name? Action ID is equal to list I.id, right? So, sorry. List, sorry, not list I. Right, action underscore ID is equal to ID underscore key, right? So we don't even need to take it here, but I want to keep my found flag at 1. Okay, so we save the ID into action underscore ID to do the search slash delete on. And then if it is though that we're doing a name search, in this instance, we want every name found to be placed inside of, we want every ID name found, ID from each name found. Let me say it clearly. We want every ID for each name found to go inside of the search result array. Yeah? So, and we could say, found underscore ID is equal to 1. Okay, just like here, we want to just switch our found flag to 1. Why we want to do this, switch our found flag to 1 in either case? Does it make sense to show the options to edit or delete if no names were found? No. So that's the purpose of our found ID flag. If no ID was found, then it doesn't make sense to show any sort of it doesn't make any sense to show any sort of menu, right? But if our ID was found, then we know that we have a choice to make in terms of asking the user to right? In terms of asking the user to have our edit or delete. Where we move from here? So we switch the found flag to 1 and we want to put each ID found inside of an array. So if we have an array, we must have an array goes along with a, how do we control an array? We use a, not the structure, but the, I'm scared. I thought the word would have rolled off a little. Not a loop, but yeah, I'll have my panicking now. Because when I think of array, I know for sure that I need to use an index. Right, Kyra said it. So we need to have an index that goes along with search results. So S underscore R underscore index is equal to 0. So the search result index, right? And we want to say, if it is that the name matched, we're printing it out, but we want to say that search result at position S underscore R underscore index is equal to the list at position I dot ID. So save this person's ID to the index list. And then we will say S underscore R underscore index plus plus. So what do we do here? We move up the index so that the next person that we found is going to be inside of there. Everybody with me so far? So we keeping a list of all of the what you call it? We keeping a list of all of the IDs of the persons that we found. Because we know once we have the IDs, we can manipulate these people. All right. So save this person ID to the ID list, right? And increment the search ID list for the next person found to be saved. All right, so I think that we have an ID or a list of IDs at this point. If we have a list of IDs, how could we know if we have a list of IDs? How could we know if we have a list of IDs? No, I mean like in memory. How do we know if we have a list of IDs or if we have, if what? If the what is one? Oh, oh my God. All right, now I sound like the insensitive one. All right, yeah, if the S underscore in R underscore index is 1, you're completely correct, Umar. All right? I just kind I can't even be wrong and strong with it in terms of taking I have an argument that you could, Anyway, right, so if the S underscore R underscore index is 1, then it means that we actually only have one person inside there. If the S underscore R underscore index is 0, it means that nobody was found, right? But we also have found ID telling us that, right? And if the S underscore R underscore index is more than 1, it means that we have a list of names to display. We can exploit that. All right? Because anyway, let's go forward. So we did the first thing. We held all the results from the name search. We want to display the menu now. So we could say if what? If found underscore ID is equal to 1, what does this mean? It means that we could, if from our search an ID was found, what does this tell us to do? It tells us to print a menu out. So we want to print the menu to edit/delete. All right. So we could just go printf. Later on, if you want, you could throw this into a function called submenu or something. So, all right. I'm just gonna do it out right here. Printf. What we want to do? What would you like printf /n. Do for actually before I print out the menu, I want to deal with the fact that we have to make a selection in the event of having multiple players. So if we search by name, right, like in the case of it wasn't Emmanuel, no, it was Dalrymple. 3, 2. Like when we have 2 Dalrymples here, that means that we have 2 persons inside of our list. We have to choose one, not so? So before we show the menu, we have to confirm which one of these Dalrymples or Dalrympleton we're going to be selecting. So we should get a option here to say, please enter the what? The ID of the player you want to edit or delete. All right? So we want to show out here if found ID is equal, if found ID is, in this case, we don't have to mess with found ID. We dealing with S_R_index. If S_R_index is greater than or equal to 2, if there is more than one person in the if there is more than one person in the list, in the search results. Yes, that's. If there's more than one person in the search results, sometimes I ask a question like I stop and I ask you all, and it's not because I'm testing you all, it's really because I just kind of lose train of thought in the middle of my sentence. All right. I know it works both ways, but like because Joel he answered it perfectly, but but really and truly, sometimes I just lost the train of thought. Right? So if the index is greater than 2, it means that there is more than one person in the search results. What does this mean for us? It means that we now have to make a decision. So we have to print out to the user, printf what? Please select the ID of the person you wish to use, right? Or edit/delete. So we prompt them, where are we putting in this ID? Right? Where are we putting in this ID? And we have to verify this ID. Yes, because verification is important to us. So we could always drop this in a do while loop. We say do all right. Please select the ID of the person you wish to edit, delete. All right. What do we want to do? We want to make sure that that ID is one of the IDs that is actually in the list. Because I don't want to show 2 results. I don't want to show 2 results and then ask the user, well, which ID to use going forward. And the user enter ID that's not in those results. What happened? Somebody else could be deleted from the list. We have to ensure that our program is consistent in how it works. So it might seem like more work is more like, we inside our function, we have an if statement, we have to put a do while loop inside of that, probably with another if statement inside of it. right? Damn you, Mr. Valdez. But, huh? You can only you're restricting the user. You're going along the Apple philosophy. Right? Huh? Yeah. Hey, yeah. Right. Folks, we want the user to be able to to make a mistake and not be punished for it. We had this conversation. No, right? Sad part is, yeah, if 10 years from now, Omar will be working in Apple, making about 8 times my salary in US dollars. You understand? And he'll be able to not do the code. Right? You'll be using an iPhone, do something wrong, and the phone will call you a stupidity, and it will be code written by Omar. You're not buying an iPhone. They'll make you buy an iPhone. They'll give you. All right, let's go. All right. So we want to select the ID of the person we wish to edit or delete. So we have to enter data for that. Okay. So I'm going back up to the top and all right. T underscore ID. That's just temp underscore ID for the user to be able to enter a temporary ID. Okay. So we go scanf %sign D, comma, ampersand T underscore ID. All right, save the ID that the user chooses from the list. And then we want to make sure that that ID is valid, right? So again, we have to search through what the user put in here against what was in the list. So we could use a for loop here. For what? For, I could use over I. For I is equal to 0, semicolon, I is less than S underscore R underscore index, semicolon, I plus plus. Right? If what? If what's the name of this structure? Search underscore res at position I is equal to if search res underscore I is equal to what the user entered, T underscore ID, right? Then we have to say again user underscore verif for user underscore verified is equal to 0. Right, user underscore verif, u underscore verif is equal to 0. Right? So, what? No, this is when you're checking against what the results are to select which one the user entered to actually edit or delete. So we move beyond checking in the we move beyond checking in the file. This is checking for user verification. And this seems, as I said, this seems extra, but CXC likes to see this kind of thing, that you have some sort of validation of data somewhere in your code. Okay? So this user verification, this variable tells us if the user selected a person from the list, right? We ask for the ID, we save the ID that the user chooses from the list. We check through the whole list, and if the user's ID matches an ID from the list, then what do we want to do? We want to say that user underscore verif is equal to true, right? Or equal to 1. Okay, so set users verification to 1. Okay, if it is that they enter something wrong, then they're going to, of course, be told that they entered an incorrect value after. So down here we do that. We say if u underscore verif, right after the for loop, we say if u underscore verif is equal to 0, then it means that we have to print out to the user. We print out to the user your what? You entered a number that was not in the list. Please retry. Okay? And this will continue to loop until u underscore verif is equal to, while u underscore verif is equal to 0. So they must enter a valid value from the list of results returned. Okay, so if u underscore verif is equal to 0, you entered a number that was not in the list, please retry. Right? Else, where could we save this verified value, that this TID from the list that they want? We could save it in the same action ID. Okay? Because action ID, when we did the search by the ID number, action ID, we only get one ID returned. So if the ID is there, then that's the ID number returned. When we do the search by the name, we get a list. When we ask the user, hey, pick one of these values from the list, that now becomes the action ID that we could use. So in either case, whether we get one or we get more than one and slim it down to 1, action ID is what we're going to do the edit or delete on. You all follow me? God. All right, so else action ID is equal to T underscore ID, right? Save this one value as the ID to edit / delete, right? If the user did not enter a value from the list, then print an error message. Okay? So let's try this and see, and I pray to God it works. Right? Let's say we search for a player, and we search for DALR. Right? And we search for DALR, and we press enter. Oops. Search for a player, sorry, by name, I meant to put. And we search for DALR. We got the Brandon and Brenda. I didn't see my options come up, so I did something wrong here. Right? Let me see. Brandon, found ID. Let me try it again. Greater than or equal to 2. I have any returns in this? No, this is a void function. Break. Printf. I just printing out some debugging information to see what I get here in s_r_index so that I could know where my program is giving trouble. 3 to DALR. It's not even showing me that. I got shower. No, I even reach in here, but I should put a get shot down there. I trying to reach to here. Hold on. After this switch case structure. Mr. Valdez. This switch bracket should end after this default case here. Alright. Which would pull all of this back here. 3 to DALR. Right, good. So it is working. What I did, sorry, I had put my code that I wrote just now inside of the switch case structure. So after I did the option 2, it jumped out of the switch case structure and it did not execute my code. So I put my code in the space where a bracket was kind of making my code be ignored. All right, so just be mindful of things like that. All right, so good. So I could now go on and see 2 view all players. Sorry, 3 search by name. 3 search by name. DALR. So it says please select the ID of the person you wish to edit, delete. If I enter 113, which is not there because the 2 IDs that came up was 111 and 118, I should get an error message. You entered a number that was not in the list. Please retry. Let me try 111. It shouldn't do anything after this point, but I would know that at least it's saved to my action ID. All right? So let's take a 5-minute break, stretch your legs, walk around, drink some water quickly. And when we come back, we're going to go into the actual edit and delete using that action ID that if we have multiple values being returned, or if we have a single value being returned, in either case, we'll use that. We also have to take a look at what happens if the list only returns 1 value. So if I search by a name and I only get 1 name returned, I didn't put in code to deal with that scenario, eh? Right? But that code is easy. It's 3 lines of code. Okay? So let's just take a little break and 5 minutes and then we'll be back.